Hey, welcome to another episode of Sober Not Sane. Once again, as always, thank you very much, Liz, from the camera store for helping with the equipment. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe and like us on YouTube. Listen to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. My guest this evening, David Chow. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You do a lot of different things.
You could say that. Yeah.
You're a multitasker.
A little bit.
Let's start with the one thing that I was watching today. You seem to do just bomb out on your favorite restaurants.
Yeah. Last year during the pandemic, when it first kind of hit, I've always had an interest in creating content, but I was never good at photos, so that's why I never went the Instagram photo route, because any picture I take was just awful. But then kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, I've always just been watching TikTok, and that's when TikTok was kind of blowing up. And I thought, hey, you know what? Like, this is some interesting take on how to do content outside of just your traditional pictures. Now it's about, creating really cool videos, which I thought I would give a try at. And I always liked the idea of really cool transitions. So that's kind of how I came about with this idea of like, well, okay, I know what kind of style I want to use for my content, but I don't really know what I want to do yet. And then I realized that, well, I really like going out to eat, needless to say.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Like, maybe I'll mix the two together. So went out with a buddy sometime. He's like, hey, you should just try filming here just for the sake of it and doing it for fun, because, there's no better time to try and make content and do something with it until you do it. So went to a restaurant. We filmed something. Blew up on TikTok. I think it got over like 250,000 views.
Wow.
That kind of kicked off the journey. I was like, well, you know what? This is really cool. And then I really pushed into it because, when I started watching TikTok, I started to realize that the organic traffic that it creates is actually very impactful, and that when that video blew up, I just followed up with the restaurant. I was like, hey, did anything happen over the past couple of weeks? They're like, yeah, we've been booked out for 2 weeks. I was like, that's pretty cool, because during the pandemic, I'm one that really supports small business, and I think that the idea of being able to support small businesses and showcase that, and just being born and raised in Calgary, I've always had a soft spot for entrepreneurs in Calgary to succeed. So I was like, you know what, if I can help out by creating content and doing something cool, then I'm happy to do it. On the other side of it too, I was like, you know what, content creation is becoming this huge monetizable source of income.
Right.
So I was like, if I could mix the two in some way that makes sense, why not? So my thesis is, I go out to try and show people really cool things because I love the city, and I find that the rest of Canada doesn't necessarily have that same appreciation for Calgary as I do. So I was like, I want to show people cool things, not just restaurants, but cool things about Calgary, so people see it in somewhat of a different light. But then the upside to that is, if I show a restaurant and the video does really well, the restaurant's going to get a huge upside because they're going to be booked for weeks straight, which I think is really cool as an influencer to be able to impact that. And then on the flip side, when you get to the corporation level of big brands and whatnot, then that's when I would actually potentially have an interest in doing something with them. But when it comes to a small restaurant, family owned, whatever it is, I have no interest in taking anything, because to me, I'd much rather just see the business succeed and grow than anything else. Just because TikTok and content creation for me is just a side gig. It's a side hustle. It's a hobby, and I just enjoy doing it, so I don't need to reap the benefit of that. Whereas I know for an entrepreneur that starts a business, like, you got to put hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital to grow and build that business. So I'm much more inclined to support that than try to reap any benefit from that. But then if it comes from a corporation level, I'm like, you clearly do well. The corporation
Yeah.
does well.
Yeah.
I'll take my fair share at that point in time, right? And that's kind of how I've always structured that concept, and it's been great. It's been really receptive, and it's kind of allowed me to grow and meet a lot of cool people, because the reality is these restaurants just don't have a lot of marketing budgets, and we live in a day and age where marketing is 100% what you need to succeed or fail, whether it be on a restaurant or whether it's a brand of some sort, apparel, any sort of product. It's the marketing that makes or breaks them. So to me, to be able to offer that for people is really rewarding.
Well, it's what amazes me. Like, I don't know a lot about what you do. I don't know a lot about what we do, but it seems to me, I was, even when I worked in television, I was saying to somebody, television and radio are going to die because there's too many places to go to watch and not have to watch commercials. And it used to be that was a great way to make money. You could own a local TV station. You're the only game in town. Everybody's going to put an ad on your station, and now that's just not true.
Yeah, I really agree with that, just because when you think about why as a viewer you watch content. It's just, when you see it on TV and it's being pushed to you, it very much feels like an ad. And what TikTok succeeded at naturally is that the content comes to you in such a way where it feels so much more authentic, right? It's everyday people telling you everyday things, and suddenly it's a different message. It's not someone trying to make a buck off you. It's just someone's, hey, I think this is really cool. You should check it out. Well, suddenly it's like, well, if my friend told me to go check out somewhere that they thought was really cool, I'd probably be inclined to do it. You get that same kind of feeling when you're listening to this content and you're seeing this short form video, which is super powerful. It's that people are like, hey, this is just everyday advice I've got for you, or this is an everyday, aspect that I think would be cool that you might like it. And TikTok is so good, in Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. They're so good at understanding what you as a viewer like, which is a little bit scary in some aspects, but they're so good at knowing what you like that it's going to find the right stuff for you, and then you're going to go and execute on a transaction of some sort, whether it be going to visit or going on vacation somewhere or purchase a product. It's just super good at making it feel authentic versus kind of forced.
Yeah, and it like the big ads like Coca-Cola and all of that, they don't need TikTok help.
No, exactly.
No,
Exactly.
they're squeaking by. But so what do they do? Because I mean, they follow the norm. I mean, my least favorite phrase is, "We've done it this way for 30 years," because the world has changed.
Yeah, and the way I would see it is when you think about advertising, you're talking about TV commercials and things like, well, the natural evolution of that was Facebook ads, Google ads, digital marketing, because people were just on their screens all the time with the evolution of the computer and the phone, smartphone and things like. Well, now what people have realized is, well, short form video is the next, aspect of marketing. So how do you leverage that? Well, content creators have come into the space where you have people who are very popular, not necessarily just celebrities, but just everyday people that have become super famous on whether YouTube streamer, Twitch streamer, TikToker, Instagrammer, and people follow these people because they find them relatable, right? I could be the next YouTube star. I could be the next TikTok star. It's not. They started from nothing a year ago, and now they are where they are. So these brands are now going, okay, well, how do we collaborate with these individuals because their audience follows them for their personality and for who they are. So how do we how do we leverage that? And so that's why a lot of brands are going into the space of influencer marketing now, because it's just so much more effective. Digital marketing blew up. It's probably one of the biggest ad spends now, and that's where Google and things like make a lot of their money. The next generation of that, I think, is going to be influencer marketing because it's just super effective.
How do you, as the content creator, how do you stay true to your vision and your followers without making it? Is it just without making it look like just a blatant slam an ad to make money, and stay true to yourself and honor your viewers?
I think that's funny because what happened was, when influencers became a really big thing on TikTok, brands would come in and then they would say, hey, we want to do a brand deal with you. And then they say, hey, this is our mandate. This is everything you got to follow. Well, suddenly it's like, well, you just give me a structure and a script to play into what you believe to be the case versus what I know my audience, I know my content, I know why people follow me. So, you run that campaign, you do it with them. And I've seen this with many influencers as they'll do it. Zero engagement. People don't care because it comes across as an ad. What brands are now reversing is they're like, okay, well, that didn't work. How do we make this work? Well, just tell them what you want to push, new product, whatever it may be, and just say, hey, just go do whatever you're going to do. Then suddenly it's authentic because they're now the creative and the creator is doing exactly what they would want to do. They're just putting their spin on how they would advertise your product or promote your product or support it. And a lot of people are much more picky in what they do now, right? So if you're a big creator, getting the brand deal doesn't necessarily matter to you because you already have income coming from different sources.
Right.
So you're going to be more selective in, does this brand fit with my audience, but also fit with my, ideologies and my values, whether it be environmentally friendly or whether it be ethically sourced, whatever it may be. People are much more receptive to, this brand needs to fit with what I believe in and what I've promoted as myself. Otherwise, it's just not going to be a fit for my channel because I've gone against what people believe that they're following me for, right?
And you don't want to become a sellout. That'll kill you, and you will not be an influencer for long, I wouldn't think.
No, and people will call that out very quickly, right? Like if you do something that isn't in your narrative, it's very blatantly obvious, right? It's just not authentic anymore. And when you've lost your authenticity, then people generally stop caring about you because they followed you for that authenticity. They want to see you being you versus you being, someone else's someone else's
Pitchman.
pitchman, right? So
Yeah, that's interesting. So somebody's out there thinking, well, I could do this. My assumption is you work really hard at this.
yeah, I think the biggest step into content creation is just executing on something. People have this ideology where it's like, oh, unless I have like the perfect plan ready to go out and do this, I shouldn't do it. The worst thing you can do is just not to make content. Just go out, put it out there, see what sticks, and if it sticks and you enjoy doing it, then do it. But if you go in with the ideology of that you need to have this perfect plan, you're going to overthink it, and then when the content doesn't do well, you're going to quit. Versus like, I'm just going to try a bunch of different things, and some people may like some of it, some people may like some other pieces of it, but whichever one seems to be the path that's leading you in the best direction, follow it, right? And I just social media in itself is giving this idea of like, well, I need to get lots of likes and I need to do a lot of this before I'll execute further on it because I need that validation. Well, you're not always going to get validation on the first post or the second post. And I know that there are places, even on TikTok in Calgary, the Chocolate Lab being a perfect example, is it didn't take, I think it was maybe their 30th or 40th video before they had a viral video, right? But you just got to keep going at it, right? And
Right.
to do 30 videos is a lot of time.
Dallas?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I know he and his wife.
Yeah, so they've got a huge TikTok account now, and it's just showing people how to make chocolate.
that's great.
Right? And it's really cool because it's just how when I traveled to Europe, that was one of the coolest things I saw. When you go to a chocolate factory and you get to actually see how chocolate's made. Well, it's like now you can see it because you just decided to open up TikTok for 20 minutes, right? And I think that's why people get engaged, and that's why people look at these things. And now for Chocolate Lab, they've got an audience that follows them across the world. They may not be able to monetize it, but at least they've got that exposure. So they expand.
They would based on selling their product. I
Yes.
mean, they make stunning. Dallas makes unbelievable
They're
stuff.
gorgeous chocolates. They're fantastic, right?
Yeah.
Like it's always been a Valentine's thing, right? Chocolate Lab is just, if you want something that looks good and tastes good, they're your go-to when it comes to Calgary
And
chocolate.
if you have any doubt whether he's great at what he does, I believe he went to France and competed.
Wow.
And basically, there were cocoa beans from all over, everywhere, and they got to pick them and do their own blends and make their chocolate really from ground up. And I want to say it was either second or third in the world.
Wow.
Which is pretty stunning.
But that's really cool, right? And to me, I like the idea of telling those stories to my audience because people don't know these things. People don't know that Calgary has world-class, food in a lot of ways, right? The same thing goes with Monogram, right? Monogram coffee is not that old. It's 5-6 years in the city, but they've competed in world competitions for their coffee, and they've come close to winning those, right? But if you were to ask anybody if Calgary had world-class coffee, people would probably think no.
Really? Well, I mean, I know who they are. I know a lot of smaller coffee companies too, and it drives me insane when people go to Starbucks. But
yeah, there's just I love coffee. It's one of my go-to drinks, obviously. And I love that the city has grown in the coffee scene, right? Like it doesn't just start with coffee, but when you just think about coffee, you have DeVille and you have, Monogram, and I know there's a few other ones that have popped up, but we have really good coffee brands that have been established in Calgary and growing and expanding outward. Because I think DeVille's opened up a location even in Vancouver, if I'm not mistaken. So, to me, these are Calgary-bred companies that are expanding, and I think that's really cool. But it doesn't stop at coffee, right? We've got different restaurant chains that have popped up in Calgary that are then expanding outward and likewise. So, to me, I get excited about that because I think that's a big draw for a city like Calgary is when the restaurant industry is improving and innovating and doing things that are more interesting than just having a bunch of chains from the US where it's like, well, we're incubating our own restaurants. Right. We have a lot of individually owned restaurants that are really starting to thrive. That makes it exciting, right? Because the best thing that I love to do when I go travel, whether it be to Europe or the USA, is just walking along random streets and just trying out random places for food that I would never find here, or just a family-owned restaurant, mom and pop shop, but it's just fantastic food, and it's nice to see that Calgary's kind of getting that level of quality as well.
Well, years ago when there was a corporate head office moving from Toronto to Calgary, they hired me to do a video to show them what Calgary was like. And I said, can you send me a list of questions? They were trying to talk their executives into moving here. And I'm sitting there, and he said, they don't even know if there are Italian restaurants there. And I was like, there's 1 million people here, right? Like, odds are there's a couple of Italians that can cook. And it was stunning to me what the outside view of our city was.
Yeah, and that's, again, as I referred to earlier, that's a huge reason why I wanted to do what I do, is because I just think that a lot of people look at Calgary and they just think oil and gas town, and that's all they think about. So they just assume that there's not much going on here. But I think that there is a lot going on here, and that's why I love to show people these things. And there is a good example of this would be Pop-Up restaurant. They did Pop-Up 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and it was just really cool themed restaurants that were here for 4 months, and they would just kind of take a vacant spot. Just because a lot of restaurants were closing down during COVID, they would take that vacant spot, they'd get leased it for 4 months, put a really cool restaurant there, and it was really nicely decorated. They were themed. One was based on like an Alice in Wonderland. Another one was kind of an art theme. Yeah, it was really cool. And I would showcase these. And these, of course, these videos are going to do really well because they're extravagant places and they're decorated to the nines. But you look at this and then you read the comments. And to me, this is what makes it exciting, is when the comments are like, I had no idea this was in my city. I love that this is here. And then other people that you see where it's like, I never even knew Calgary had these things. I kind of want to go visit now. And to me, that's the best thing you can do for a city that you love, right? Is to draw in people to it that otherwise maybe didn't ever think that they'd have a purpose to go there. I mean, yes, the Banff and the mountains is always going to be the draw, but there is a food scene in Calgary. There are great restaurants, and there's a lot of cool things that you can do in the city too. And I think that, being able to showcase that is important. And it's not just food, but when you think about how the city's developing, even from a technology standpoint, in East Village is gorgeous, and they continue to grow new things. The BMO is getting renovated. It's going to be a whole new kind of conference event center there. And to me, you got the new library. We have the new technology building going up just across the street from the library. Like, that to me is, downtown's going to start to look really, really good from an outside perspective, because we've just got a lot of things growing. And I think, when I think about the city, I would not be surprised if it starts to grow very quickly, especially just with the way real estate prices are going.
Well, in different things.
Yes.
As opposed to everybody looking at downtown. There's one thing that it's driving me nuts right now is, it's that, there's an ad running right now for Bronco beer. And I was driving my ex-wife to the airport, and I was like, when are they going to give up on the cowboy crap? This is not a cowboy town anymore.
Yeah, it's very much true. It's not just a cowboy and oil and gas town. It's grown so much more past that, and I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, that's really going to be showcased, where it's like, no, this is just a world-class city.
So how do you have another company called Accelerator?
Yeah, so I work for a company called Accelerator, and we're kind of in the technology space. What we do is we help startups grow to the point of, when they would grow to a point where they would need venture capital. So we're funded by a company called BRYAN Capital. It's a family office venture capital investment arm. And what they invest in is everything non-energy, just because the family money comes from the energy sector. So they don't necessarily need more exposure to that sector when you already own a company in it.
Yeah.
So our mandate from that perspective was always everything non-energy. But what we found is in Calgary is a lot of the companies that are raising capital just aren't necessarily where they need to be to justify having a check into that business. So then that's where we said, okay, Tribune Capital, investment capital arm, that's fine. There's still companies that exist in Calgary. There's great technology companies that have been born and bred out of here. Neo Financial, you've got Athenian and things alike. But then for these early stage companies where it's like, well, you're not quite ready for that venture capital check, but let's help you get there. So we provide 2 different programming. One is our Accelerator program, which is more technology focused. We'll help you build that technology. We'll help you grow your business to a point where then we believe it's built up to a point that does need venture capital.
Okay, I got a question for that, and then we'll go to the next. I know you got another subject right in your head.
No worries.
So how do you do that? Like, I always find anybody that's got a business that they're starting, they're really, really excited, even on a small level of people, wanting to be like in a market or just find a little bricks and mortar place, but they don't have a clue. I mean, I had somebody tell me, my girlfriend makes great cakes. We're going to start a store where she sells one kind of cake. So how do you take, and obviously this is, they think, a brilliant idea, and they're in love with it. how do you gently move them towards you might need more?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you think about entrepreneurship, starting your business, is that when we look at the businesses that come to us for funding or for our help, we say, okay, well, let's have a conversation. And I will have a conversation with anybody because I think everyone deserves that conversation, because whether or not we can invest in you and help you, I will at least point you in some direction that you should be able to find help for what you're trying to do. So a lot of companies are maybe so early stage that they just don't even know where to begin. Calgary's got tons of resources when it comes to that. Like ATB has a bunch of startup programs, as well as there are other accelerator type programs called like the Accelerator, and I know Junction, or I guess it's not called Junction anymore, but Platform Calgary, which is the one that owns the new innovation center. They have a new accelerator being built. I can't remember what they're calling it now. It's going through a name change, but those programs and resources are free, right? So you can go and learn everything you need to about starting a business. But if you've already started it and you come to us, well, you're at a different stage. So how can we help you, right? So we talk with that founder and we understand, what are you trying to solve? What's your business and what do you need help with? And how we grow those companies is, well, if we truly believe that we can help you out, let's have that discussion. And what do you need from your perspective? So for a lot of the times, if it's a physical business, a little bit different. If it's a technology product, well, you likely don't have a developer on board. You likely don't maybe have some business sense in the understanding your segment that you're operating in or the sector you're operating in, but you may not understand how to get this going off. How do you incorporate, or how do you go about marketing the product or getting your first customer and things alike? So we'll always look at that founder and identify, well, what are your key strengths and what's really valuable you as a founder to operate that business? But then what are you missing? Because everyone's missing something. And that's where we come in and say, okay, here's what we identified as your strengths. And we think that this is where you will really excel on your business. And here's where we think we can help, because you're going to need help on the marketing side. You're going to need a developer. And we basically step in, and we provide those pieces. So we view ourselves as acting as an extension onto that founder team to help build that business to a point where you would then, assuming it grows big, you would then go raise capital and then you replace us. Use that capital to hire the people that what we were doing for you.
Okay.
Because that's what you need for your team. You don't need someone that's always going to be on the side. You need people in the core of that business to help it grow. And again, I speak from more of a traditional startup technology B2B type business, whereas on the more retail side of things, we'll always give advice, but it's just those are not the businesses that we know how to scale up, right? Like I couldn't go to a restaurant and be like, hey, this is how I think you're going to make the next, Ito or the next, Mucho Burrito. It's like, that's so far outside our scope, because you need a really good industry expert to understand how to grow that kind of a business when it's more the physical side of things. But with that said, we have people in the restaurant industry that we can be like, hey, if you want someone to talk to, go talk to this person about opening up your restaurant or starting a cafe. And it's funny you mentioned the whole cake thing, because, we've had people where it's like, oh, I don't know where to start. Well, it's like, don't invest $50,000 in a lease. Maybe go talk to somebody who has a spot already, where you can have a nice little collaboration where they will have your product in store for them, and you just take, you take your share, they take their share, and everyone's kind of happy, because then you kind of get to test your thesis of whether or not you should open up a store
with less risk.
Yep, and it is less risk, and I think that sometimes that's the better approach for people, is because it's like, what's your financial capability? The last thing you want to do is put your life savings into a business to test and trial, when you can de-risk that by trial and erroring. And we've seen many, and it's become a very popular model where people are like, hey, we got an ice cream shop, but they just sell ice cream. Well, what if do you want to sell our donuts? Because then you can offer something different with the ice cream. They're both desserts, they're both sweets. And people are open to that. They're like, well, I mean, we got empty space here anyways. We may as well sell your product, because you have 10,000 followers on Instagram and they want to buy your product, and it works. And some people don't even need it, right? Some people, you can just operate through your Instagram account. You get your DMs and then you just fulfill orders. People come pick it up from your house or whatever. And that works too. So, I mean, you just got to point people to one, think bigger than they already do.
The right fit.
Exactly.
So, the funny thing is, I've had people come to me. I have the pasta company and the sauces and stuff. And one of two things has always happened to me when somebody went, oh, we want to put it into whatever retail chain, grocery, and immediately it went to, well, we'll have it manufactured, and we're going to have to change the. And I'm like, first meeting, hey, okay, yeah, I'm not here to change what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't want the product to change. I want some authenticity and some honesty in what I'm selling. And if you can get into some places, I mean, I know somebody that's paying 45% commission.
Wow.
And I had somebody ask me for myself, well, we're going to charge you 30%. No, thank you. It's my margin. How can I give you my margin?
It's true. It's true. And I think that that's where a lot of the good advice comes from is it's not, to me, it's not about telling the entrepreneur like, hey, your idea sucks. This isn't going to work. It's more like, hey, let me point you in some ways to do some more research for your business to help you figure out what's best for you, right? Because whether or not we accept a company into our program and we want to work with them, the advice is the same. Do what's best for your business and do what's best for you, and let me help you figure out whether or not we're fit for that, right? Or what that is. Because the last thing you want to do is take away their creativity. The second that you've stripped away the entrepreneur's creativity and their baby in a lot of ways, well, then the passion dies, and a business with no passion is dead, right?
So, are you just selling the name, or do you really want a product out there? And for me, my name's on it, so it's like, I've worked hard on my name. I'm not going to watch it. Yeah, we bought that stuff and it was just shite, and it's my mentality of doing it. But have you had anything? I mean, even you watch they're not truly investment shows, the Dragon's Den and those. I mean, they can make a deal, but they don't have to carry through with it. They're making a TV show.
Yeah, for sure.
They're not really looking for new partners. I mean, sometimes it happens. But what was the doorbell one that the guy sold the company? He got a no.
Ring.
Yeah. Ring. Yeah, he got a no from everybody, and he sold the company, I think, 2 years ago for $1 billion or some obscene amount of money.
Oh, for sure. And to me, that's just a lesson to be learned in finance and venture capital holistically, is that just because someone tells you no doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. So that's why I always go the idea. It's like, I may not be the best fit for you, but I can at least point you in a direction that you're going to get more knowledge and hopefully meet the right person that will help you out. Because if I'm to sit here and tell, no one's track record is perfect. It's just by nature. Yeah. The Dragons have missed, and the Shark Tank as well. They've missed tons of billion-dollar opportunities, right? But that just tells you that just because they're really good at what they do doesn't necessarily mean that they're always right. You're going to be wrong along the way.
Well, and you're still, no matter what, you're only pitching to 5 or 6 people.
Exactly.
Not everybody.
Exactly. And so that's why, to me, I look at a business, and sometimes businesses are very flawed in the way that they operate and that the product is. And I'll say, hey, so instead of saying, hey, your product sucks, I'll be like, hey, maybe you should do some more market research on this product to see, what the demand is for something like that. Because then they go and do it themselves. You can't, to tell someone no and their idea sucks, you're not guiding them anywhere. You're just telling them something that is not very helpful. But if you tell them, hey, do some more market research, try to understand if you're truly solving the problem that you believe to be solving, and if there is true value to that. And somewhere down that path, a lot of entrepreneurs will go down it and be like, you know what, this probably isn't the product that I should go for.
Is that one of the things that people need to answer before they move forward? Is this solving a problem that I think it is?
I think so. I mean, to me, when you sell anything, it's got to solve some sort of problem, and it doesn't have to be a crazy sophisticated problem. I mean, the difference between one clothing brand and another is not really much outside of the branding, but in some aspect, they pitch it to you as it's solving a problem in some form or fashion. Most consumer products that we use, I mean, like I recently got a Yeti, and it was just they market it great, right? It's like, did I ever think that I needed a reusable mug that was great at holding cold and hot beverages? No, but when I got one, I was like, oh, it's kind of nice, right? But it's because their marketing strategy is that they've always been they have a good, solid product that solves a problem. And the way that it was marketed to me was because everyone was buying them, and then you hear about it, and it's like, I didn't really think I needed that, but, I guess I do.
Well, in a really simple way to look at it, a restaurant, if the problem is I'm hungry and I want something delicious, the restaurant idea solves something for them.
Exactly. And I think part of it, too, is not necessarily, it's understanding the problem you solve and believing whether or not you can market that in a way that makes sense, right? Because not every consumer is going to understand that they have a problem unless you tell them that they have a problem that you're solving. It's like, oh, I didn't think that this made sense to me, or that I would need this, in the same way that, when iPads first came out, a lot of people were probably like, oh, why would I ever need this iPad? I have a laptop, I have a desktop, I'm good. But then the way that they marketed it was very different.
Oh, I immediately thought I needed that.
Fair enough.
I'm an
Fair
Apple
enough.
guy, though. It's like, hey, look, new toy.
Well, that's just an attribute to Apple's ingenious marketing, right? Is they've created such brand loyalty that people will blindly buy their products because they believe in the company and their vision and what they do. But for other people that maybe are not early adopters to Apple technology, the iPad was something where it's like, well, why would I need a tablet? I have a laptop, I have a desktop, right? But
Yeah.
then they showed this is why you need a tablet, and suddenly everyone's like, oh, I guess I do need a tablet because this is so cool. Right?
And how far behind were the other companies to when they came out with their tablets?
Yep.
How far behind were they from the iPad?
Very far behind. And honestly, it's not like the iPad was the first tablet that came out. It's just other people tried it and failed because they didn't know how to market it or make a product that was truly value additive to somebody, right? They just threw it out there thinking, let's be different. But if you just throw things out there to be different without knowing the true value that you're trying to create or generate, then you don't really have a successful marketing plan, right?
Well, I'm down to there are very few things that I do on my iMac. Or I still have my original. Oh no, it's not my original. My second laptop, and I had a laptop from Apple before Apple was in Canada.
Wow.
I was down in the States a lot, so I was like, I have to have this, and it's kind of funny because I talked my my ex-wife, and I talked her dad into getting one, and he was quite a bit older, and I didn't realize I would become their IT department. And I would always say, think of the simplest way to fix this, and that's probably it. And do you think that's kind of the thing that Apple went with, like to make it simple?
I truly believe Apple succeeds in creating a minimalistic experience that's intuitive enough that it gets everyone excited, right? So Apple, I used to always be an Android guy just because I like to toy around, and I've always been very much a PC person because it just gives me the flexibility to do a lot of things. But I can appreciate Apple, and I use an iPhone as my work phone is because it just keeps things very simple, and I get what I need to get done very efficiently, and it's just done very smoothly. And I think Apple succeeds in by creating this sense of technology for people where it's like, hey, we provide simple solutions to complex problems, and I think that that's where Apple succeeds.
Okay. So somebody's sitting at home watching this or wherever, and they have this, everybody would say, oh, I've got $1 million idea, which is kind of shooting low these days. But $1 million doesn't go that far anymore. But what do you think their first step should be?
I think what makes the evolution of the internet and everything alike super exciting is that to be an entrepreneur now, it doesn't cost a lot of money. To open up, if you think that you want to make, a simple product, it's like, hey, I think people are going to be into dog fashion, right? Like, go out, make some samples, test the market, right? Like it doesn't cost a lot to test the market because social media is so accessible. If you want to open up an e-commerce store, it costs you what, a $200 Shopify 1-year subscription? Like when you think about before, without the internet, how much did it cost to start a business? You got to go get a storefront. You got to go put in paper ads. You got to do all these things. Now it's a couple $100 and social media is free.
Well, it's down to it now as far as an online store, which I need to get taken care of. But you can go with, I use Square. It's really simple. It's easy to use. I can build a site through Square. They'll take the orders, send me my money. So, I mean, it just gets easier and easier.
Which I think is really interesting because I don't think entrepreneurship was accessible as it is now. So, I would not be surprised if the next generation of, young students ends up being a lot of entrepreneurs is because it's just so accessible to try new things. And, what stops anybody from doing something like a podcast or from, being a videographer or photographer? You just have so many more channels to show your work that, you didn't have that. And not only that is it's free. If you had a product and you want to show it before, you had to pay for advertising. Well, now you don't.
Yeah.
Now, to succeed further on your e-commerce store, you got to pay for advertising. You got to run your digital marketing and things like that because that helps you grow and expand your product. But to get started, you definitely do not need to spend nearly as much as you used to, and you have so many resources out there. And it's not even just the resources that are available in terms of being able to operate your business, but in terms of knowledge. Anything you want to do, someone else has done it. So go out there and watch a YouTube video about someone who started an e-commerce store
Yeah.
and learn from them. And I think that that's what's super exciting about, this new age of technology is that there is so much knowledge out there that if you have a passion for something and you want to pursue a business, there's endless resources to go out and figure it out, right? And to me, again, my best advice to anybody who wants to run a business is just go do it because it's so accessible now.
It's really funny. Years ago when first, you got email coming out, and I mean, I'm that old. And I said to somebody, I'm looking at the computer, I'm going, oh, you know what this is? And to me, it's always an old idea, but a different way to do it. And so if you can get an email list, I said it used to be you'd make up a flyer and you'd take it around neighborhoods and you'd put it in the mailboxes. And I said, oh, it's an electronic mailbox to send out flyers. And it was just like, I try to look at the most simplistic way to look at these things. But how do you think, okay, this is going to be the new thing? Like TikTok, you said you were on top of that pretty quick.
Yeah. To me, it's funny. To me, people always ask, oh, like, how do you know a good pitch between a bad pitch? And I'm like, honestly, my best piece of advice for anybody who has to review pitch decks is whether or not, if the founder has told you that no one else is doing it, then I will write that business off because everyone is doing something in some capacity. So that just tells me that you haven't done your due diligence to understand it because true innovation in terms of breaking the mold completely is not the case anymore. It's just so hard to innovate in a way that's so new that no one else has done it. Maybe from a manufacturing standpoint, if you're building a new product, sure, it can be done differently in that sense. But when it comes to software and things like, everyone's, like we're creating an application for a wait list. It's like, well, that's been done 30 times over, but it doesn't mean you can't succeed. It doesn't mean you can't win in that space. It just means that I need to understand how you're different than everybody else. And that to me is how I would rather view someone pitching me a business is here's what I'm doing differently than everybody else. And here's the value add that I'm bringing in as my business versus no one's done this before. I'm like, everyone's done everything.
That's how I feel.
So tell me who your competitors are, or tell me why everyone else who's done it has failed and why you're going to succeed. And to me, that's a much better pitch because that's more real. Because if you've got someone who just believes wholeheartedly that what they're doing is different than everybody else and no one else has done it before, that to me comes across as someone that may not be coachable. And the worst thing you could have as a founder is to not be coachable in some aspect because no one knows everything. So you may be right in your decision-making process, but to have at least an outside voice to say, hey, you should consider this, you should look down this. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to tell you things to consider so that you can do some research on your own to learn. Because again, the best ideas come when people are collaborating, not when you just do everything yourself. So that's what I like to look for in these businesses is like, go do the market research because true innovation doesn't happen. And even if you look at TikTok is short form video, but before that it was Vine. Vine just failed. TikTok found a way to do it better. But I can guarantee you on their pitch deck, it wasn't, we're going to be the first company to do short form video as content. It was like, no, that's been done over before. You're just doing it in a way that's way
multiple
better.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, you know what, and I don't watch much on TikTok. I just, you know what, there's just too much stuff out there.
There's a lot of content.
And I think my little hard drive is full. I forget everything. And, honestly, what in a simplistic way, what you're saying is a really old idea, and it's build a better mousetrap.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's not, not everybody in the world, but tons of companies have tried to come up with a better way to catch a mouse, but there aren't a lot out there.
No, it's 100% true. And I think that being able to understand that and build a business around that ideology is much easier because if you're sitting there thinking, okay, I want to be an entrepreneur, but what product should I do? Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just make it, you can just make it better. And that can be a winning product, right? Like Ring doorbell at the end of the day is a doorbell, but they just found a way to make home security integrated into your doorbell. And suddenly it's like, oh, you got $1 billion business, right? Not obviously that's not always going to be the case, but those are the things, right? Everything that we use is just an improved iteration of something else that we've used. Cell phones have, the touchscreen was never a new thing. It's just someone decided to implement it into a phone, and suddenly you've got the iPhone, which is a multi-billion-dollar business, right? So it's just, just innovate on what's already out there.
Do a better job.
Just do a better job or market it better, whatever it may be, right? Like the difference between a lot of companies aren't necessarily that they're completely different from each other. It's just who markets it better.
Well, it's funny because I love it when people, oh, you got to go to this restaurant. They're, they always, I find a lot of chefs go out of their way to, I'm going to make this fusion thing. And then you're just like, yeah, but it's shitty.
Yeah.
Like just because you can put these things together, it's kind of like singers. I always say, just because you can hit a note and hold it for that long doesn't mean you should. Because sometimes it's just aggravating to listen to.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with the whole fusion concept too, right? It's like sometimes it's like you don't need to do a fusion restaurant to be successful in the restaurant industry. You can just be really good at your specific cuisine that you want to target.
Well,
right?
what's really good? A good sandwich.
Yeah.
Subway doesn't make one, but a good sandwich is. But to me, the Subway ideal was, and when you're on the road, when I was on the road, you would eat at a Subway, not because it was good, but because you knew exactly what you were going to get.
Yep.
And I think that's the way that model works. It's not a bad sandwich. It's just not a great sandwich.
But there's something to be said about consistency, right? It's like if I know
Yeah.
that I know exactly what I'm getting, and that's the value I want to attribute to it, then hey, there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, and sometimes you would go into a small town and you'd ask, what's the best restaurant? Well, you would discover quickly that other people like way different food than you do.
Yeah, and I think that that's also the thing with when it comes to food and restaurants and things like this is that you're never going to appeal to everyone. So
No.
figure out what you want to appeal to, and that crowd will follow. And I think that that's one of the big things is that everyone's got individual tastes. Like there are people that would never touch sushi in their life, but does that mean you should open a sushi restaurant? No, because there's tons of people that will.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, my dad had a sport fishing business, and we'd go out on the boats, and they were big ships. I mean, they were 80 to 120 feet, and we'd have all these passengers on there, and you'd make extra money, basically butchering their fish for them on the way back to the dock, and we would never give them the heads, and we'd keep the heads and cut the cheeks out of all the fish because that was, to me, the best part of the fish.
Yeah.
And we were eating it raw fish all the time, and it was just I think every fisherman has done that.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's just the great thing about food is that, it's just, it's so appealing to different people for different reasons. And, you look at a story like that, it's like, well, how many people would get to experience that if it wasn't brought to them in some form or fashion, right? Like,
Yeah.
you experience it because you're a fisherman, which is why I love the different cultures and the different cuisines, because it's like, well, I love to try different cultural foods because unless I go to that country, I'm not going to be able to try it. So that's why I love that Calgary is truly expanding and that it's not just your typical food. You're getting a bunch of different cuisines and good ones at that, right? It's not just crappy food. It's good food from different cuisines. And to me,
I think that is a product of years of immigration.
Yes.
And people bring their food.
100%. And that's why I love to see it happening. When I talk about the restaurant scene in Calgary evolving, that's part of the reason is that you're getting so much different cultural food that's coming into here. And what better diversity and inclusion to be able to experience different foods from different cultures. And to me, that's the sign of an industry and a city that's truly growing is when you start to have all these different options. And it's great because I love to try new things and I love to experience new things, and to be able to start doing that in the city that I grew up in, which was very much not that way back in the day, it's very rewarding to see.
And over the course of popping into these restaurants in Calgary, do you have one that was your biggest surprise?
To me, I always really, really liked Bridget Bar. So, everyone's always raved about Concord Group, and I've been to some of their other restaurants. But,
Yeah.
The thing with Bridget Bar to me is like, if you look on the outside, it just looks like your typical kind of restaurant, nothing there. But the food there is actually, in my opinion, really good, and it's actually very affordable for what you get in terms of quality. So, I like finding those sweet spots where it's like, it's priced well, and the food quality is there as well. But you wouldn't, from the outside, you wouldn't know. And I think that that's what makes a really cool vibe is when you get to go to somewhere where you weren't expecting the food to be as good as it was, but it's actually very, very good. And I know that everyone knows that now, so Bridget Bar is always popular and it's always booked out because they've built up that reputation.
Yeah.
But before, when it first opened, people didn't know, right? And to see how that kind of evolves. Same thing with 10 Foot Henry, right? When 10 Foot Henry first opened up, people didn't really know about it. But the thing with Calgary is if you've got good food at your restaurant, word spreads like wildfire.
Yeah.
And I think that's.
Do you think
that's
it's
very
because
rewarding.
people are always looking for a new place to go?
I think so. And that's why I love to see the industry expanding in Calgary is because people always want to try new things. And that's the only reason why my TikTok has succeeded in the way it has is because it clearly shows that people just want to experience new things. It doesn't have to be food. It can be different things. Like, there's been some art exhibits that have come into town that have been really cool that, I've showcased and different types of events. So I think that the fact that Calgary's getting all these things that arguably other cities always get, but the fact that we're starting to get them too is really, really cool.
Well, it's interesting. I like listening to CKUA, and almost constantly I'm going, well, who the hell is this? And they do feature a lot of Canadian artists, and I always thought that radio in Canada went about it backwards by trying to force radio stations to play X amount of Canadian content. And if you look on a world scale, there's a lot of Canadians that have had huge success.
Yeah.
And it's always, I'll always be listening. And they're really good about finding great Alberta artists as well. And it's shocking to me.
Well, I think that exact thesis is why Spotify has done so well as it has, is because it defeats those boundaries. Listen to whatever you want to listen to. We're not going to force anything down your throat. Whatever you resonate with, Spotify's one. It's going to learn your patterns, which is, again, the whole idea of algorithms and AI is just remarkable in a lot of ways, where it's like Spotify's just going to know what you like to listen to, and suddenly you're gonna by nature find new artists that you didn't even know existed because you like that genre. And I think that that's really cool, and what's powerful about all these different ways that we absorb content, whether it be movies on Netflix or music from Spotify and things alike, right?
How do you break the algorithm on Netflix? Because you watch like 3 things in the same genre and it'll pound you with anything close to that.
It's true. It is very true. I think what Netflix does well is that it knows what you watch, but then at the same time, there are so many different genres that have succeeded on Netflix and big hits. For example, like I can guarantee you 99% of the people that watch Squid Games had never watched a Korean show in their life, but it just knows that this is going to be a big hit for North American audiences. Let's shove it down everyone's throat and see what happens. Yeah, but it worked. It was super successful. And, to me, I also like seeing things like that happen because now you've got this new generation of people that are looking at, Korean content or Korean culture. It's not my background because I'm Chinese, but it's cool to see that diversity coming into play where you're getting to learn things about other cultures that you otherwise wouldn't. And I think that that's what's powerful about, that kind of content becoming popular is it really gives people an understanding to get more cultured, which is to me the biggest win about Canada is that it truly is the ideology in Canada that, we want to be multicultural here and we want to experience different things and learn about different things.
And don't you think that I used to take, when my kids came up from the States, I'd take them to Heritage Days, and they had to eat something from every country there. Yeah. And I think, okay, like if you can have food with somebody and understand their food and then kind of breaks down that they're not that different from you anymore. And I found I've watched some French detective shows that I was quite stunned by. England, the UK does some pretty good TV too, and they also don't beat it to death. They don't try to hit 100 episodes. They do it until it dies its natural death and let it go. And for a little while I was watching a couple of different, I guess they call them novellas from the Latin markets. And I just think it's, like you say, it's a great way to understand people.
Oh, 100%. So did you watch, so for me, again, the way that my algorithm broke is I watched Lupin, and to me that was the first.
Do you watch what?
There was a show on Netflix that was really popular. It was called Lupin.
Lupin. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I watched that, and that was my first one that was in French, and it was, would I have ever engaged or looked for French? Probably not, but this was so well done, and they pushed it in such a way that it appealed to the audience to be like, hey, you should at least give this a shot. Gave it a shot, and it was one of my favorite shows of last year.
But I think the when you look at content like that from other countries, it's kind of interesting to see their sensibility.
Yes.
Where the French shows, they have nudity, but it's not, like I think I mentioned on the show before. I watched one, it was a police thing, and it was like, oh, it's from France and there's going to be nudity. The only nudity was cadavers being autopsied.
Oh.
But, people getting autopsied are naked.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, and I just find the European thought of it is, well, that's what naked people look like.
Yeah.
And I think it diminishes the whole being naked isn't always a sexual thing.
Oh, 100%. And I got that same feeling when I, started watching more Asian content, whether it be from Chinese or Korean, where it's like the way that romance is viewed in those cultures is very different than how romance is portrayed in North American TV, right? And I think that's, there's no right or wrong, but at least it gives you perspective. And I think that being able to have perspective from different countries, different cultures is a great thing to be able to have.
Well, actually, my neighbor at the market does coffee, and he's from Colombia. And I was telling him about this show that I was watching that was from Colombia. And I go, man, this actor is like phenomenal. And he goes, yeah, he's been a star in the Latin movies forever. Yeah. And, they I guess at one point were trying to get him to improve his English so that they could utilize him in English-speaking parts. And he kind of had no interest.
Interesting.
He was happy where he was. And to me, the Hollywood thing is, well, you're not a big star until you're a big star in Hollywood. And it's just not true. There's a lot of other people out there.
Oh, 100%, right? Even when you think about, the MCU and Shang-Chi coming out earlier last year, it's like the villain in that movie was actually very, very famous. But if you asked anyone here, no one ever would know. But
right.
I can guarantee you that if you went to Hong Kong, everyone would know who he is, right? So I agree with that wholeheartedly, right? I think people we get kind of confined in the North American bubble that we don't necessarily realize that there's a whole other world out there.
Yeah, it is. It's bizarre. I mean, and there are a lot of people, especially in Calgary, that have the means to travel a lot, and some do and some don't. Yeah. And I'm an American. We had a president that had never left the U.S. soil, with the exception of going drinking in in college in Mexico, until he became president.
Yeah, yeah.
So could you have a less worldly, theoretically, the leader of the free world?
No, I agree. I always encourage people to go travel, because I just think that when you get to experience things in different countries, different culture, whatever it may be, it just gives you so much more appreciation when you come back home, right? Like you just learn to appreciate different things for different reasons, whether it be coming back home and appreciating where you are, or appreciating how things are done differently elsewhere. So when you see it here, you have a different appreciation and level of respect for what's being done from those cultures or from those countries, whatever it may be. And I think that that's just a powerful thing to have as a person.
So when you're do you just film like restaurants that you just happen into, or do people tell you, oh, you should go check this out?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a hybrid between the two. So there's, I follow the restaurant scene quite religiously, just because I love food and I'm always want to try something new. So if something new opens up, I'm definitely going to go there, and I'm definitely going to film it, because why not? And then there are times where people will outreach to me and be like, hey, have you ever been here before? Because this place has the best tacos in the city, or this place has the best burger you could ever get in the city, and things like that. I'm like, well, I didn't know about it, but I want to try the best burger, or so what people have claimed to be the best burger or the best taco. So I'll go, and I'll go film it, and I'll talk about it. And I think that's what makes the content creation really fun, is I'm getting to discover the city. I talk about showing people things, but I'm also getting to see things I didn't get to see in the city, because there's just so much. There's so much going on that we just don't realize that Calgary has a lot of cool pockets of different things that unless you truly go out and seek it, you're not going to find it. So I love that I've been able to get more cultured and more experience at different places that I would have never heard of, because it's some mom and pop restaurant in, some edge of the city that I don't really regularly go around, but they've got amazing food. And it's like, oh, well, I'm going to go there and try it out, because I wouldn't, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's the sad truth.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. This is a question for in the restaurant field. Is there a Georgian restaurant? And as my neighbor sells spices, and he just got back from a trip not that long ago, and he said he'd never been to Georgia, and he always says, I mean the country, right? Not the state, because it's pretty standard food in Georgia, the state. But it's one of those where I never even considered that it would be a different culturally food.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And to think of it, no, I don't know anyone or any place that serves Georgian food. And I think that while the industry is growing in Calgary, it's growing in the sense that you're getting a lot of more cultural food, but still mainstream in that everyone knows what Chinese food is, Japanese food is, East Indian food, things alike. But we haven't reached out so far where you're getting the other pockets, the smaller ones, right? We're getting the big ones, the big cultures that are very prevalent in the food culture, but we're not getting the niches yet. And I think that I'm hoping that that's where the next stage of this growth in the industry goes.
Well, I think it probably started too that people immigrated from wherever, from China, and it's been in the States forever. And some of them started restaurants. And they probably didn't get that many non-Chinese customers. Yeah. And then it was that slow people going in and go, hey, this is really good.
Yep. So I would agree. I think that that's going to be the natural expansion is people immigrate over, they open up their own little specialty store, whatever it may be, and that's where, it starts to grow and expand from there. And I think that that's where all of the cultural stuff, whether it just be on food or fashion and whatnot, I think it just starts, someone immigrates over, and the best that they can do by nature for a lot of people is open up a small little family shop, and then it just grows and, it expands further from that as people get more exposure to it.
Yeah, and we actually had a shop that is no longer there at Crossroads. I think they've moved into a 7-day, bricks and mortar, and it was Japanese products, and some food, but not all food. But it was like really innovative containers and just stuff where you go, God, look at that, and it all folds in, and then it becomes this big around, but it can expand to this. But the weirdest one was when I first moved here from the U.S. In the U.S., there's Italian and there's Chinese but there wasn't a lot of expansion into other countries. And I knew almost nothing about the U.K., other than, of course, the U.S. saved them during World War II. But that's their story, and they're sticking to it. But I went to Marks and Spencer, Marks and Sparks.
Oh, okay.
And my new Canadian wife, I come home, and they were at Chinook, and I come home and I go, I found this store called Marks and Spencer. It's like the best store ever. I got the food that I needed and socks and underwear, and I thought it was like the coolest thing, and it's just, it's very common in the UK.
Yeah, and that's I love that because when you mentioned the Japanese store and then the containers and they're foldable, they're compact, and it's like from an external perspective you just think it's cool. But if you have traveled, it is efficient. But for people who then have traveled to Japan, they understand why it's that way is because you don't have any space.
Yeah.
Right. So that to me is a perfect example of where you get that appreciation. You come back home and then you see those things. You're like, oh, that's why it's designed that way. That's why it works in that way. Is because it needs to be. Is because you gotta be smart.
They found a need and filled the need.
Yeah. Exactly.
I watched the show and there was they were delivering food in India, and I've been to India actually and saw it being done there, and they have the stacking canisters.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
they're all tied together, and there would be one guy driving the motorcycle and a guy on the back holding like 4 huge stacks of these, and they
Yeah.
delivered lunches to offices.
Wow.
And a niche market, right? There were
Yeah.
guys that wanted to bring in food, and they found that was the easiest way to carry all of that food.
Yeah. But how cool is that, right? Like it's something you'll remember forever because
Yeah.
it's just
Cool.
You know, it's super cool to see how things are done
And
elsewhere.
smart.
And smart, yeah.
Yeah.
It's it gives me, going anywhere always just gives me an appreciation, right? Because whether things are done better here or there doesn't really matter, but it just gives you an appreciation for how things are done differently, and I think that's the best part about that experience. And then you can even drive that into so many different life lessons, right? Whether it be for business, right? It's like business done here is very different than business done elsewhere. So, to be able to have those experiences really gives you an idea of, well, how can you be different? Because, everyone is different in some
To
capacity.
meet a need for another culture.
Yep. Whether it be culture or just even, a need between one person or another, because everyone, you and I probably don't buy the same products. Same way in like your Apple and I use a PC. It's like, well, but those two companies know how to market to those different demographics, right?
Yeah, to the person that will best utilize it.
Yeah. So, and I think that's part of the best lesson that an entrepreneur can learn is that, do some product discovery and do some customer discovery, because you may not realize that the customer that's going to buy your product is actually not the customer you thought was going to buy your product, and suddenly you've got a market that you can serve. And that's what you find a lot of businesses happen is they'll come to you and be like, yeah, this is who we think is going to be our target market, and then you go and market it, and it's like, you know what, it was actually something that we never even thought would happen, and this is our customer base now. And it's like that's why you got to trial it, right? You're not going to be right in what you think is going to be your target market, but you can certainly define it that way, test that market, but then test others to see if it sticks somewhere else. And if it does, well, suddenly your business is feasible now. It may not have been the way you thought it was going to be, but it's still feasible.
But it fit a need.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so somebody's out there and they want to get a hold of you. If they've got a business idea, what's the process?
Honestly, so we have our website. It's liftaccelerator.ca, and then there's an application form. It's very simple. It takes maybe 5 minutes to fill out, and then I will always get in touch with them and say, hey, let's chat for half an hour on a Zoom call or whatever, and let's figure out if there's something to be done. If not, then it is what it is. But let's have a chat, and I can guarantee you that you'll get something out of the chat. Both of us, honestly, because
Right.
you learn from both sides. You learn from the entrepreneur, and then the entrepreneur can learn from people who have the experience, that have seen successful entrepreneurs and seen companies grow. It goes both ways. You should always be learning, no matter how successful you are. You should always be learning, right? And I think that's how I see every valuable meeting to be one, is because I'm willing to go and chat with these entrepreneurs, willing to learn something, listen to their story, and hopefully I can add some value to them by being able to point them in the right direction. Or if it's a fit for us, then that's the value that we try to add, right?
Well, you certainly have a great way of looking at it. Sounds very welcoming.
Yeah, and it's just, I think it's funny because I think that's part of the Calgary ecosystem. Calgary business has always been very collaborative, and especially when it comes to the startups, the entrepreneurs in the tech space, much more collaborative than any other ecosystem that I've, had to work in some capacity when it comes to, cities like Toronto or Vancouver. And part of it is because I think, one, that's just how a lot of Calgary is done business, but also because the industry, especially on the tech and startup and the entrepreneur side of the equation, we're fairly new. So when you're new, you're collaborating because you want to grow it. Whereas if
It's
you're
probably a small family.
it is a small family, right? And when you look at places like Toronto and Vancouver, which is more established, then you kind of compete with one another, which is why I love being in Calgary, and I love being in this industry, this growing industry in Calgary, is because it's just super collaborative, where everybody at the table wants everybody else at the table to succeed. And what better way to be motivated than to everyone to
Watching
win,
success.
right? Like, and that to me is what gets me super excited, right? Is just everyone wants to see winners here because everyone loves the city, right? And everyone loves the idea of the city becoming bigger than it was before, in terms of being seen as more than just the oil and gas city or the cowboy city and whatnot, right? Like, there's
Right.
so much more to offer here than that, and I think that people are starting to get on board with that.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here with us and for your time.
No, I appreciate it. It was great. It was a great chat.
All right. Thank you very much. As always, it's a interest. I learn more than any guest that's ever been here has learned. Again, let's thank Liz from the Camera Store. Follow us once again on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe and like us on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And we will see you next time on Sober Not Sane.